right, so moving on to alterations. Now, what I suggest my order for pants alterations is do all vertical alterations first before you do circumference alterations. So vertical first. So the only vertical I have here is the crotch depth, right? So I need mine to be at 14 3/4. So remember your crotch depth, I'm reading over here. So your crotch depth includes the waistband, right? So the first thing you need to do, and like I said, you'll find this usually on the back pattern, all right? And usually there is a line, and as you can see here, it says crotch line. Now, if yours doesn't, for whatever the reason is, it is typically the thigh, and this is also what I consider the thigh. Some people do about a 1/2 inch under the crotch line for the thigh, but I use the same line because it's not that much of a difference. So if they don't have this line, just mark it your seam allowance underneath this your crotch curve here, because all this is your seam allowance, right? And if you don't know, usually tape measures are either 5/8 of an inch in width or 1/2 inch in width, right? So sometimes you can just use your tape measure, and this you can see that's where that line is, all right? Because my tape measure is 5/8 of an inch in width. All right, so first thing we want to do, so this is our crotch line. So we need to see from the top of our waist, including the waistband, right? From there down to here, what this is. And again, I need mine total to be 14 3/4 of an inch. It never is. I always have to add to it, but that's what you're doing. So first things first, what you want to do is you are using at the waist, excuse me, at the waist, you want to start it at your seam, your stitch line, I should say, your stitch line. So you need to find that. So that's my crosshairs here. So here, this is your stitch line for your side seam. This is, you know, putting at the top your stitch line for your waist, right? So that crosshair here is where you're going to start measuring. Now the waist on this pattern is about 1.25 inches. So you got that mark, right? So now what you want to do is line up your grain line. This is another T. So your grain line with your crotch depth, you want that to be on the grid, right? All right, so you can see my grid underneath. I'm just lining up those lines so I know that they are, you know, crossing each other on the line. And so that intersection basically is at a 90-degree. All right, so if you can see, my lengthwise is along this black line, right? And my crotch is along another one of those grid lines. So I know that I am even, right? All right, so from here, what you want to do is, and go along the side seam, because remember that's how you measure it, along your outer thigh, and this is the side seam area. And I usually have the one, it doesn't matter, I usually just have the one at where the crotch depth is, and you want it to be, you know, where at the top where your hash mark is, your what do they call that, bullseye or crosshairs is, that's where you want to kind of line that up. If you can get it on grid on a line, well, that's better. So as you can see, if I measure from here all the way up, okay, it says this is 10 3/4. So this amount is 10 3/4. All right, now remember, that's just this. This doesn't include your waistband, so you have to add the waistband, right? So if that's 10 3/4, 10 3/4, right? And the waistband, you gotta take the measurement of the waistband, make sure to use your stitching line, not the whole pattern piece. You gotta do your stitching line. The waistband is 1 1/4, okay? So that is 12 inches. All right, so 3/4 and 1/4, that's 1. Okay, so 10, 11 plus your 1 you had, 10, 11, 12. That's how I got the 12 inches. All right, what do I need? I need 14 3/4, right? So I need to add 2 3/4 inch to the crotch length. Okay, usually there is a lengthen and shorten line on here. This pattern does not, but you want to do it typically between the lower hip line and the upper hip line, which is in the middle here. So you want to do it basically here in the middle. So in between the lower and the upper hip line is where, you know, you would create, you know, you would slash all the way through. I'm gonna show you this on a half a scale pattern. Slash all the way through, and I'm going to open it the 2 3/4 inch that I need. All right, so that's how you do it. All right, so now we know that we needed to add 2 3/4 to the crotch depth, right? So we don't have a wedgie or camel toe situation happening, because that's no fun. That's not comfortable. All right, so we are back, and so we'll be doing the crotch depth adjustment, which is the vertical adjustment. These are quarter size patterns that I got from clothingpatterns101.com. I highly recommend you go there, check out the website. It has a lot of good information, and also you'll be able to download these quarter size. And here are half size patterns, and I have half size for everything except for the pants. All right. And I got these from Sure Fit Design. Whatever typically you do to one pattern, you have to do to the front. Not always, but typically it's good to be universal. But sometimes you may want, like for instance, more width in the back, you know, to cover your bum area versus you don't need it in the front, you know. But again, that's a circumference type of thing versus a crotch depth, which is a vertical. But anyway, so whatever the crotch depth I'll be doing to the back, I'll be doing to the front. So I won't be showing you on both because they're the exact same thing. Waste of time there, but just wanted to let you know. So whatever we do to the back, you also do it to the front for the crotch depth. So first things first is you're going to outline your pattern and all, you don't need the knee because we're working up here, guidelines. Okay, so outline your pattern. If you want, you could even stop here at the knee. And then your guidelines, which is your crotch line, which is, oh, she even have it, upper thigh. I didn't even know that. Crotch line and upper thigh here, and then hip line. And then she didn't mark it, but this is in the middle between your waist and your lower is your upper hip line. And so you're making a mark there as well, okay? So as you can see, I have mine. What can you see? Yeah, there you go, have mine. All right, so what you wanna do now is cut this out so we can start working on it. Remember, we are making the crotch depth adjustment, which is basically lowering this line, your crotch depth line, lower. I'm not doing anything. Lower, so you know, it doesn't create a wedgie camel toe area. So No. So what you have on your pattern is between the upper and lower, you have this dash line represents a lengthen and shorten line. It's typically on all patterns, but the one that I showed you, it was not. But if it's not on there, it's usually smack dead in the middle of the upper and lower hip line. So what we're going to do is cut along that line, and if you needed to add, you're going to spread apart. Oh, sorry, what you also need is your grain line, which is also on there, the grain line, right? And I would carry it all the way up to the top. All right, so now we're going to cut across. Alrighty, so now we got two separate pieces. Okay, we cut along that upper, the shortened, lengthen and shorten line. Now what you want to do is grab some more paper. Now, since this is a quarter and I needed 2 3/4, what do you think?
Hi. Can you make this video to 100 likes? And comment below what's your favorite part.
All right, and so I needed to lengthen mine by 2 3/4. I'm using a quarter scale pattern, so you divide that by 4, which is 11/16. And if you look on the ruler, you know, if you have a ruler here or a tape measure, that is between the 5/8 and the 3/4. So I just put 5.5 over 8, so it's just easier for me to find it on here. All right, so what I did is start off by making a line and then increased it by that 5.5 by 8, or 11/16 is the same thing. Made a mark and then did a line. So this area here is the 11/16, which is, you know, in quarters, but that, you know, because can't make the full, I'm only working in quarters. Okay, so what you want to do is, first things first is you want to tape this to the top of the line, like so. All right, you know, you can tape the back too. And then you want to extend, remember that grain line that we did? Extend it down. Bless you. So that way you'll know where to line up the bottom piece. You're just gonna make grain line to grain line. All right, so matching up the grain lines. Like so. And then you're gonna add your tape. Okay. Oops. I need to tape a little. I need to tape a little better. But anywho, so now you want to just connect the dots here, kind of following the curve that you kind of see. This one is kind of like a straight, or you can use your curve ruler. This one obviously is curved, and as you can see, this one scooted out some, you know, so you can either start down here and just do the difference. Start here. You just want to make it as less of a dramatic change as possible. Then, alrighty. All right, and then, so now I've done added my I don't know how you want to put it, 11/16 or the 2 3/4 inch. This is for the quarter pattern. Okay, and that's how you increase the crotch depth, or to decrease it, you just do the total opposite. All right, so that is the crotch depth. So the guidelines that you would need for the scooping is the crotch line at the stitch level, not at the seam allowance level, but at the stitch level. Okay, and you'll also need the lower hip line, so make sure to draw those in. And then you also need the stitching line, so make a little mark there. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm moving the crotch depth line along this because I want it at a right angle, okay? Because I'm going to use the 45-degree angle once I get to the right angle here, 90 degrees, okay? So I'm placing the crotch line on that line, and I'm moving it until along my lower hip line reaches that upper line. Okay, so I moved it and it's right there. Let me do it slower, I'm sorry. So it's here and I'm moving it until this line reaches this line. Hopefully you can see this. That's the right angle line. All right, so now it meets. Now what I'm going to do is draw a straight line from my pattern. So from up here, that's where I can still see that line all the way down to meet the crotch, okay? So this will be my right angle. And then I'm also going to draw my 45-degree line, which is here. I can see underneath my grid, draw that in, okay? So those are the two lines that I'm drawing in. Did you show for me? All right. Go like that, then I'll connect it. Because it's being finicky. All right. All right. And so I'm gonna have this one. Hopefully you can see those. Make that darker. Sorry, I'm using a pencil. All right. So hopefully you can see. We can place it that you can kind of see those lines. There we go. You can see now I created a right angle here, and that's my 45-degree. Okay. So since this is the back pattern, this line has to be 2 inches. Okay. So we are going to put this on 2 inches and make a mark. 2 inches. That means this amount right here is too much. I have too much fabric because it's only supposed to be 2 inches. Okay. Now you can take a curved ruler, you know, and do that, or you can freehand it. And what you want this to stay at a 90 degree. And you know, you want to fade it so it doesn't go into here. But that's how far you can go up if you need to. Okay, this you want to make sure at about a 1/2 inch you keep that as a straight line so that doesn't move. So what I usually do is just make dashes. And dash, 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 dash. You know, kind of up to that line up there. Then I would darken it. So that's how much I'm scooping out. You can see that, okay? Because this has to be 2 inches. Any more, that means it's too much fabric. All this is too much fabric. I'm scooping that out. Okay, you're repeating the process for the front. The only difference is instead of 2 inches is 1.5 inches. So the front is 1.5 inches, and you do it exact same way. Okay. All right, so for the front pattern, what I want to caution you about is, you know, doing this adjustment. Hopefully you can see it, put it here. The line actually came all the way up to here. Okay. So it came all the way up to here. Now you want to make your adjustment, you know, away from any important stuff if you can. So here you can see, you know, this is the zipper stop, this part of the fly. So if you can, try to avoid or be very minimum when it comes to something that's up here. So, you know, and I did have to make, so this is 1.5, so I did have to make, you know, take out fabric here. So what I did, I tried to do it as close to the zipper stop as possible. It still went over. It went over right here, but you see it's minimum, very tiny right there. But so, you know, just did my curves. And so basically this is the amount that's been taken out basically of the front, scooping out the front. Okay, so the goal is to stop your alteration before you really get into, you know, different areas in the front that if you get in there, it may, you know, affect fit or the look of it. So that's the only thing with that. All right, so I started off with another, you know, drawn off pattern from using one of my little templates here. So that's that. And so we'll be working on the pivot method. So you got to make sure to have all your guidelines marked. So you need your waist, upper hip line, lower hip line, and thigh for this intense purpose. Because everything below that kind of is big, you know, so not fitting. So we know that's going to be kind of big. So don't really have to worry about that. So if you remember, where's mine? Oh, it's right here. That I needed to add, what did I say? Needed to add 3/4 inch to the side seam for the waist, and for the hip I needed to add a 1/4. No, needed to remove. Sorry, 1/4 inch from the side seam. Now what I forgot to put on here, which took a little finessing, or will for you take a little finessing, especially if you have a pooch, is the upper hip measurement. You want to make sure that at least this is matching that with a little bit of ease. Okay, so you need to take your upper hip measurement as well. So you'll need some scrap tracing paper, and to do the pivot method you also need something you can stick pins in, because typically this has to be in, you know, you have to put pins in, or tacks or something like that, because you want to pivot like that. Okay, but I'm gonna just try to do it with my hand. So what you want to do is make sure on all those spots you want to mark in the crosshairs of where your seam allowances is, because we don't want to take that into consideration. So we'll say the seam allowance is here, seam allowance is here, here, and here. All right, so you want to make sure that you have your seam allowances marked. All right, so basically the first thing you want to do is, you know, you can place the pattern, you know, kind of midway here, or your pattern doesn't have to be on the entire part of your tissue paper, just half of it, because the markings or adjustments we're going to be make is just on the side seam, and you want to have a little bit on the top and a little bit on the bottom, so as guides, so you know where to place your pattern back. But you're really accounting for just the side seam and making adjustments to your side seam. Okay, so what you want to do is have two colored pencils or markers or something like that. Yeah, that storm out there. That wind. Okay, so where we left off was we are going to outline you know, maybe half of your pattern. Okay, so along the waistline, side seam, and the hem, and then you're going to just extend your guidelines out a little bit. All right, so remember on the waist I needed to add, and I'm going to say on my upper hip line I'm going to need to add, because typically I do, so whatever that is, or at least wanted to make it whatever it is, because doing this pivot will actually add to it anyway. Okay, so at least make it whatever your circumference is as a starting point. Lower hip line, I needed to subtract that. Okay, so how I'll do that is, this is the outside, meaning adding. So I made a mark on the inside. You can see that I made a mark on the inside and placed the mark there, saying that I needed to subtract that. All right, and whatever mark you made at the hip, you're going to make it at the hem. Okay, so whatever mark you made at the lower hip line, you're going to do that same measurement on the hem. So I had to come in, so I'm coming in on the hip line. All right, so what you have to do is at the very top, because you can't pivot, you know, at the top, what you first do is at the waist, okay, you're going to slide over to your marking. So the first step is just to slide over to that marking, making sure that your side seam, and you're not sliding over to the crosshairs, just where the side seam is. Okay, so you're sliding over. So that's the first step, right? So now we are at whatever increase we said. Now you're going to take a pin or tack and place it at that crosshairs. Okay, so here comes the pivot. So say we place the pin at that crosshair, and you're going to pivot. This is just, you know, pivot to your next mark. My next mark is there. I'm pivoting there, right? So now you're going to draw a line using another colored pencil, because this is the alteration. All right, now from here you're going to remove the pin that you have here at the waist, and now put it at the upper hip line. So you're putting it there, and you're going to pivot, swing to wherever your next marking is. And for me, it came in, so came in here. All right, so from there you're going to draw in, right? So now you're going to take your pin from the upper hip line, and you're going to place it in the lower hip line. You're getting the repetitive of this, and then you're going to swing it to wherever. Uh-oh, light's about to go out, people. There's a windstorm. To hip measurement, which means we're bringing it back, right? All right, so now your pin is there. Now, mind you, I did skip over the thigh, but the same thing applies to the thigh. You know, if your measurement was here, wherever your measurement is, you are making your mark. And basically, wherever you're pivoting at, so if you're pivoting at the crotch, your pin goes directly above it. If you're pivoting at the hem, like we just did, it goes to the most nearest pivot point, okay, which is right above it. So now if you look, the blue line is your alterations. All right, and so if you have some jagged edges or anything like that, you're just going to take your ruler, or you can freehand it and smooth it out. So I'm smoothing it out here. You just don't want any straight points like that. You just don't want any straight points. You want to smooth that out. So you smooth that out, and so that is your new adjustment, and that's pivoting. Now, mind you, you did not disturb this pattern at all. It is still totally intact. You didn't cut it, you didn't do anything with it, at least not yet, but I am gonna cut it. All right, so now what you do is put this pattern back on your original line, which is, for me, is this red line. All right, and so you can see, let me come out there. All right, and one last thing, when you come over and mark that one, I forgot to tell you, come all the way up to the top. So you have it all the way up at the top, or at the end you can freehand it, however you want to do it. So bring it back to the original red line. Okay, so, and you're gonna start taping. All right, starts taping your pattern down. So mind you, see here, you can't see your alterations, right? You'll be like, hey, what happened? What am I gonna do here? All you're gonna do, so you can keep your pattern intact, is fold back your pattern. Oops, taped it too much there. But fold back your pattern so you can see your blue. Okay. And that is all you're going to do. And now when you cut out your pattern, you're going to be cutting along the blue line, which is your new, oops, come on, which is your new pattern piece. And there you go. So, you know, your pattern is intact. And so for me, because I'm gonna do some more alterations, which involves cutting into this pattern, I can't avoid it. If you want, at this point, you can make a new pattern piece. All right, so you don't disturb your original if you have to do some of the next steps like I have to do. But that is the pivoting, and that is to just the circumference that we needed, you know, at our points at the waist, upper hip, and lower hip, and crotch if we needed it. Okay. Excuse the wind noise, but I like natural weather sound, so I'm trying to keep the window open. But it's really windy out there. It's a windstorm, wind gusts. But anywho, okay, so the next alteration you may or may not have to do is along the crotch curve of the front pattern only, okay? Because we need this front, or I do. You guys hear that? That front curve to be, I'm sorry, and along the stitch line as well is what I'm referring to, needs to be, for me, no more than 4.5 inches. Now, how do you determine that? It's trial and error. It seriously is. But the best way to do it is to find a pair of jeans that you like, preferably find 3. Okay, because we're gonna either you can take the average or you can take the most. Okay, so and typically, like for mine range from 3.5 to 4.5 in range for the 3 that I did. So I always do 4.5 because, like I said, it's easier to take away than to add it back in. You know, and every pattern is different, so I always like to err in the on the side of caution and have more than less. So I always do the most, and for me it was 4.5. Okay, so this is along the front crotch curve, and then pattern only, front only. Okay, and along the stitch line, not the cutting line, let me get my words together, but stitch line. And I don't have all of mine in. And again, remember, measure your tape, because it's either a 1/2 inch It's either 1/2 inch or 5/8 of an inch, and you can use that as a guide instead of pulling out big clear rulers for everything. And this should be 5. Okay. All right, so you see that is my line. So I'm starting at the zipper stop, going down here. And remember, this has a crosshair here. So I'm actually stopping here. So from zipper stop to my crosshair, which marks the seam line, okay? So again, I like mine to be 4.5. But if it's less, so let's say mine, so remember mine was 3.5 to 4.5. And I like it to be at 4.5. But if it's less than 4.5, say it's 4, I'll keep it. I won't enlarge it. I won't do anything like that. I only make alterations if it's bigger than 4.5. Okay, let me clarify that. So this one is 4.5. So this one is 4.5. I didn't want it to be 4.5 because I wanted to show you. Oh Jesus. Okay, so it's okay. So let's reduce this one. Yeah, it's 4. It's 4.5. All right. So let's say it's 5. Let's pretend that it's 5, and I want it to be 4.5. Okay. So I'm gonna do one that's one inch underneath the zipper stop, and I'm going to make a line. So this is actually at my lower hip line. So if you want to always do it at your lower hip line, that's fine. That can be something that just ingrained in yourself to always do it at the lower hip line, making your first line, your straight line here. Nothing wrong with that. Now you're going to measure down, what I say, 1/2 inch. Measure down 1/2 inch. And we're gonna say 1/2 inch is right here, because this is more, so we have to reduce this, right? So now we're going to take that mark that's down 1/2 inch and bring it back up to our line here, okay? And you want it to come, you see, you want it to come that intersection of the crosshairs, ideally. All right. Alrighty. So this now becomes a hinge point, this crosshairs. So what I do, because you know we're about to cut, is I put pieces of tape. It's like a reinforcement there. All right, and you're gonna cut along the not the straight one, but the angled line that we did in order to make whatever difference that you needed. Mine was 1/2 inch, so the second line I'm cutting against. Okay, not the straight line that's at the hip level, but you know, the angled line that we came down in order to make this adjustment. Alrighty, so you're gonna go up to that hinge point, but not through, and then you're going to turn it around, make it easier for me. I'm going to cut into on the other side, creating a hinge, so it'll be easier to move. Now what you want to do is take that second line and meet that straight line. So we're closing in that 1/2 inch that we did, right? So there we go, close that in. All right, so we done closed our gap here, and so now from the zipper stop to the, you know, on here, on your crotch line here, the intersection, mine should now be at 4 inches. Okay, again, like I said, yours is different, may be different. I just encourage you to take that measurement. You know, get 3 pairs of jeans. You want them to be snug fitting, so that's why I say jeans, because you want it to be sitting at your crotch area, and so you can take that measurement. You don't want loose hanging type of pants to take this measurement. All right, so we made this adjustment, and as you can see, there's a little jagged right here, right? So all you're going to do is just blend that in as fast as you can. So I will be taking off this little part. Now if you cut off anything that has, you know, a marking, a notch or anything like that, make sure to replace it. So that little in red, you can see in red right here, a little bit is what I'll be taking off to true that.